Under the dazzling lights of Hollywood, Patty Duke seemed like she had everything. She was America's sweetheart, a child star whose charm, talent, and emotional depth had won her an Oscar before she was even old enough to drive. But behind that innocent smile and the applause of millions was a girl being torn apart by the very system that made her famous. Patty Duke's story is one of brilliance and heartbreak, of fame and self-destruction, and at its core, a lifelong battle with alcoholism that almost took everything from her. Born Anna Marie Duke on December 14, 1946, in Elmhurst, New York, Patty's early life was anything but glamorous. Her father, John Patrick Duke, was a working-class man struggling with alcoholism himself, a shadow that would follow Patty throughout her entire life. Her mother, Frances, suffered from clinical depression and struggled to raise her children in a home filled with instability and fear. By the time Patty was just 6 years old, her world fell apart completely. Her parents separated, leaving her in the hands of a pair of talent managers, John and Ethel Ross. And that's when the real nightmare began. The Rosses saw something in little Anna Duke that her own parents couldn't protect: potential. But instead of nurturing her, they controlled her. They took her name, changing Anna to Patty, and took complete control of her life, her image, and even her emotions. They dictated what she wore, how she spoke, and who she could see. She wasn't allowed to be a child. She was a product, molded and marketed for fame. Years later, Patty would describe that period as a prison with no walls, where her smile was a mask and every word she spoke was scripted. At just 12 years old, Patty landed the role that would change her life forever: Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. The role demanded emotional intensity far beyond her years, and Patty delivered a performance so raw and powerful that she stunned audiences worldwide. In 1963, she became the youngest person at the time to win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. For the world, it was a fairy tale moment. A poor girl turned Hollywood legend overnight. But for Patty, it was the beginning of a descent she couldn't control. The fame came fast and hard. Suddenly, she was in demand everywhere: television, film, public appearances. She was given her own TV show, The Patty Duke Show, where she played identical cousins, one proper, one rebellious. Ironically, that duality mirrored her real life more than anyone realized. On screen, she was bubbly, funny, and adored. Off-screen, she was terrified, isolated, and manipulated by adults who controlled every dollar she earned. While the cameras loved her, Patty's personal life spiraled into confusion. She wasn't just overworked, she was deeply traumatized. She later revealed that John Ross, her manager and legal guardian, had emotionally and physically abused her for years. The fame, the awards, the headlines, they were all built on pain. By the time she turned 16, Patty was already turning to alcohol as an escape. The constant pressure, the lack of control, and the deep scars from her childhood pushed her towards substances that could silence the noise in her head. Alcohol became her comfort, her friend, her medicine, the only thing that numbed her long enough to keep going. She once said in an interview, "When you grow up being told who you are, what you can say, and when you can breathe, alcohol feels like freedom." But that freedom came at a devastating price. As she entered adulthood, Patty's drinking worsened. Her career, once spotless, began to show cracks. The innocent girl from The Miracle Worker was now a young woman fighting demons the public couldn't see. She started missing rehearsals, showing up late to sets, and clashing with directors. The industry that had once celebrated her now whispered behind her back. In 1965, she starred in Valley of the Dolls, a film that was supposed to mark her transition from child star to mature actress. Ironically, it mirrored her real life more than anyone knew. In the film, she played Nelia Hara, a talented young woman destroyed by fame, addiction, and self-doubt. It was as if she was watching her own downfall play out on screen. Behind closed doors, Patty's drinking spiraled out of control. She began mixing alcohol with prescription medications, leading to violent mood swings and emotional breakdowns. Her relationships fell apart one by one. She married young, impulsively, desperately, but the marriages never lasted. Her first marriage, to director Harry Falk, ended in chaos fueled by jealousy and substance abuse. She would later say she didn't even remember large parts of those years because the alcohol had taken over her memory. As her addiction deepened, so did her loneliness. The little girl who once begged to be loved by her parents was now begging bottles to take away the pain. And yet, she never stopped working. Even when she could barely stand, she would show up on set, determined to perform. That professionalism, that need to please, came from her childhood conditioning. She had been trained to hide the pain, no matter how deep it ran. Her friends and co-stars saw glimpses of the truth. They noticed her trembling hands, her unpredictable moods, and the way she'd disappear for days. Some tried to help, but Patty wasn't ready to listen. The more people worried, the more she pushed them away. Fame had built her walls, and alcohol had locked the door. In one haunting interview years later, Patty reflected on that period, saying, "I wasn't living. I was performing for survival." But the real tragedy was that nobody in Hollywood wanted to talk about it. In the 1960s and 70s, mental health and addiction weren't discussed openly, especially not for women. A male actor could be troubled, complex, or tortured. But for a woman, addiction meant one thing: she was difficult. And that label nearly ended her career. By her late 20s, Patty Duke's reputation in Hollywood had begun to crumble. Studios stopped calling. Casting agents avoided her. The same industry that had used her up as a child now turned its back on her. She was seen as unstable, unreliable, and broken. And instead of finding support, she found herself drowning in guilt and shame. Her second marriage, to Michael Tell, lasted just 13 days, a sign of how chaotic her life had become. Soon after, she gave birth to her first son, Sean Astin, the future star of The Lord of the Rings. But even motherhood couldn't save her yet. The pressures of fame, coupled with her addiction and untreated mental health issues, made her spiral even harder. Patty's drinking got so bad that there were moments she couldn't remember filming entire scenes or attending important events. Friends later said they would find her sitting alone in dark hotel rooms, staring into space with a half-empty bottle in her hand. She was chasing silence, the kind she never had as a child. By the mid-1970s, Patty Duke was at rock bottom. The fame was fading, the money was gone, and the drinking was killing her slowly. The little girl who once made America cry as Helen Keller had become Hollywood's forgotten tragedy. By the time the 1970s faded into the 80s, Patty Duke was no longer the golden girl of Hollywood. She was a woman barely holding herself together. Her career was in shambles, her personal life was chaos, and her battle with alcohol was consuming her from the inside out. But what no one knew then was that her drinking wasn't the only monster she was fighting. Behind every drunken outburst, every sleepless night, and every broken relationship, there was an even deeper pain, one that had a name, but that she wouldn't discover until years later. In 1982, after decades of struggling in silence, Patty was finally diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It was a revelation that changed everything. For years, she'd been called crazy, unpredictable, and impossible. She'd lived through extreme mood swings, soaring highs of manic energy where she felt invincible, followed by crushing lows of depression where even breathing felt unbearable. And every time the darkness came, she turned to alcohol to numb it. But with that diagnosis came understanding. For the first time in her life, Patty Duke realized she wasn't broken, she was sick. The shame that had followed her since childhood began to fade, replaced by something she hadn't felt in decades: